Hello, my loves. Welcome. Welcome. So I'm streaming live from two different places, Instagram and the Self-Reclamation Collective. So we'll take a little moment for beautiful, gorgeous women to trickle in and to see how everybody's doing. If you're watching this on replay, then let me know and let me just say I'm watching this on replay. Hello. And we'll begin very shortly. Hello. Today we are talking about the father wound. This angle is so funny. Right, so today we're talking about the father wound and transforming our relationship to men. It's a really deep topic, so we'll see how far we go, but I just want to kind of get you to set yourself an intention to transforming your relationship with men. If you're not happy with men right now, if you're unhappy with the men around you, if you're unhappy with the way your relationship is going right now, if you are unhappy, if you are unfulfilled right now with the way men are showing up in your life right now, I ask you to set an intention to transform the way you see men, the way you show up for yourself. I ask you to take responsibility for the feminine and the masculine energy inside of you. That is really the foundation, as you're going to understand and recognize today. It is really the foundation to how you show up in the relationships and the dynamics between you and men, and how you're bringing in men in general. So I'm very excited for this. So let's begin. Let me tell you what I want to talk to you about today, what we want to cover. Today I want to cover the father wound, okay, our relationship with our fathers. I want to cover how the father wound affects our relationship with ourselves. It affects the feminine energy, how the father wound affects our relationships, and actually how the father wound affects how we show up in life. Okay? And it all falls down to the feminine energy. And so when we speak of father wound, we will speak interchangeably of the wounded feminine. And when I say wounded feminine, all I mean, a definition of a wounded feminine is when there is an absence of feminine energy, or there is a lack of development, lack of embodiment of the feminine energy due to the traumas experienced in our childhood and the years leading up to this moment right now, that affects the masculine and the feminine, the anima and the animus traits that are the archetypes that Carl Jung talks about, the psychologist Carl Jung talks about, right? So, and it really dictates our relationships in our lives, and it dictates our how we show up in life, what kind of energy we go into life. So you see women that are incredibly masculine, you see the women that are incredibly feminine, and that determines the people that we attract in our life. But so much more than that, it determines how we show up in our business, what kind of structures and foundations we set in our business, what kind of structures and foundations we set in our household, what kind of dynamics we set in our household between us, our partner, and our children. So there is so much to this. And so when we speak about the wounded feminine in conjunction to father wound, why is that? Because the father wound is really, and I should tell you what wound, why we say wound to begin with. The wound simply in Greek means trauma. Okay, so when we talk wounds, it's an emotional scar inside of us. It's an emotional scar. That's a really simple definition of a wound. We all carry wounds. We all carry scars. It is totally normal. Nobody has ever taught us how to process our emotions. We are shifting out of that now. We are raising our frequency and we are raising our emotional intelligence so we can show up better for ourselves and our partners can have a yes, yes. So really it all stems from our childhood. It all begins in our childhood. Why is it that when we speak about relationships, our relationship with our mother and our relationship with our father is so important? Because we know this in psychology, that the way we perceive our mothers, the kind of mother figure, the kind of feminine figure that our mother is, that's how we perceive all the other women around us until we do the work. This is where all the competition towards other women comes from. That's why we struggle so much to create a sisterhood. Can I have a yes? Yes. Who wants a sisterhood? If you want a sisterhood, join the Self-Reclamation Collective right now. Okay? So this is why the way we perceive our fathers when we are growing up, the kind of father figure, that is the way it determines our relationships with men. That is what we seek for, and you will begin to understand this. We'll begin to embody this information and this wisdom today. Okay? So say hello, whoever's here, because on the Self-Reclamation group I cannot see who's here, my love. So say hello, hello. Say hello if you're watching this right now on Instagram. Tell me, talk to me. I need your energy. And also ask questions, okay? So in this moment in time, whenever you've got a question pop up, I'm going to try and answer that question for you. Because I'm not just giving you information, we're feeding off each other. So give me information too, okay? Share it with the community. This is what this is about, loves. Okay? So what we're doing right now, what we're doing today is we're taking a microscope and we're looking at the father wound under the microscope so that we can understand. Joanna says this is such an important conversation. Yes, this is such an important conversation to have, because this is where it begins, my loves. This is the foundations of gorgeous relationships, and I know this. Believe me, I know this. So we're looking under a microscope today so that we can really begin to unpeel these layers of ourselves. And I always say, if you've been watching masterclasses in my videos, I always say you are like an onion. And the core of you is that inner child that's been so detached from the playfulness, from that feminine, that healthy feminine, from that healthy masculine, being detached from that sense of self and identity, because there's just so many layers over time that we become and the ego clings onto, because we get hurt, we get wounded, we get blown away, we get knocked down in our lives, and we don't want to get back up. So what we do is we create a shield. Yes, you create a shield. Okay? That protects us our heart from creating relationships that are fulfilling. It protects us. And so simply to define the father wound is when the father, whilst you were growing up, especially between ages 0 to 7, you have to kind of hone in on that 0, okay? From the moment you are conceived, your mother's emotional energy is transferred onto you. Your mother's emotions, you know why? Because emotions are simply chemical reactions in your body. And the chemicals go straight, and when I say chemicals, I just mean different messengers, hormones, go into us. And we receive all these templates, all this information by physiologically and energetically in our bodies, in our minds, and ourselves. And so 0 is important. The way you were conceived, under what pretenses your mum was, what kind of state of being she was in, what kind of state of being your father was in at the time. These are all important things for us to draw attention to so we can begin to liberate ourselves. So our father wound really stems from father who was emotionally unavailable, who was physically unavailable. So your father could have been, he could have been there for you. Like my father, for example, he would always work really, really hard so that he can provide for the family. And what is that? That is a patriarchal response. That is a patriarchal conditioning. Men have been put under so much pressure. So not just women suffered under patriarchy of being shut off from their truth, from their voice, from their identity, who they are, as sexual queens, goddesses, priestesses, and healers, and channels to life. Men were also shut off from their core innate playfulness, from their core innate truth. They were under so much pressure to provide for the family, to lead, to be successful, to have a business, to have this, money, and all of that kind of stuff. Really feeding to those patriarchal masculine structures. So the father could have been physically absent, emotionally absent, controlling, or simply critical of who you are. Okay, so that's a big one. We don't understand that. And sometimes that happens with the mother wound. And you have to understand that the wounded feminine doesn't just come from the father wound. Okay? So the feminine traumas are basically under the umbrella of the mother and the father wound. And there can also be a sister wound too that we have to explore. Okay, so there can be many traumas, but they kind of trickle down to why there is an absence of feminine energy. This is not toxic femininity. This is not toxic masculinity. No. It's just we're not embodying them because our core child, inner child, which is basically the pure love that you were born with. Because you imagine when you were just conceived, all you were, and when you were born, all you were was just love, right? You were, like when you were a baby, you weren't thinking, oh, I must not cry because people are gonna think I'm crazy or weird or whatever. No, we don't have those filters. We simply cry, we express, we have tantrums, because there isn't that filter, there isn't that conscious filter up until the age of 7. So up until the age of 7, we're a blank canvas. And so our mind is totally subconscious. And so the neuroscience of this is simply that everything that is stored in your subconscious mind, which is 95% of your mind, is you and everything around you. Your thoughts, emotions, beliefs, your traumas. And there's a ladder of transformation here. In self-reclamation, we call this a ladder of transformation. Your core traumas, your initial incidents that we're talking about today, the initial incidents, that's like the core, that's the hardest bit to crack. And after this, there is the belief systems. The belief systems form based on what's happened to you, what kind of associations you have created in your childhood. Then we have the emotional step in the ladder. All of your emotions inside of your body are attached to the memories inside of your mind. That your mind lives in your body, by the way. It's just controlled by your brain. And so finally, that dictates your thoughts, narratives, and stories that you tell yourself daily, also unconsciously, subconsciously. And finally, this dictates your actions. And why am I telling you all of this? Because people believe that there is some magical mechanism. This is literally to the core of transformation. As a transformational coach, I can tell you that this is what we apply to every single client in the School of Self-Reclamation, the one-to-one coaching that we do, everything that I do. I have to do this with people. I had to do this on myself. And of course, it's kind of playing on different levels and different ladders and so on. But at the end of it, we have to go through all of the layers, and it all begins with the trauma. So today we're going at the core of this. So the wounded feminine, I need to give you some understanding of what is the wounded feminine and how it manifests. And I really love the analogy, and I think the first time I heard it was I'm not sure. I'll remember, I'll let you know. But it's not my analogy. It's how a plane sets off, never lands. So it never lands to feel up. It never grounds itself again. So a wounded feminine is like the plane coming up, rising up, and it never sets back down. She's ungrounded. She's not in her body. She's totally in her mind. She's consumed by her thoughts. She is flighty. Another word for that. There is lack of trust. There is shame of her truth, of her identity. It's hard for her to even recognize what her identity is, because she's for so many years she's been creating an identity. So she's been creating a version of herself in order to survive. Because for whatever reason, that identity, that is her true self, has not been safe for her to explore. Why is that? Can anyone tell me why is that? Hi, Raphael. Lovely to see you. So have a think. Why? Where do these things come from? They come from the wombs, right? So specifically, we're looking at the masculine ones today. So when we look at the masculine ones, it's really abandonment, rejection, and betrayal that are the biggest ones. But of course, like when we actually go deep into healing these wounds, everything is so convoluted, and there's a lot to work with. But if you have a systemic process, it's really easy to shift it. So if the father was emotionally unavailable, then does the child receive love? The father naturally loves the child. And this is another thing to understand, is that just because your father loves you in one way by giving you gifts, that's the way the father learned to give that to you, to give that love to you. But all you needed that emotional availability, that emotional support, just that presence. I love the word presence. I think it really resonates, because when we're present, we're emotionally available, because we are in connection to our emotions. The only reason why the father wasn't available was because he could not face his own emotions, so he shut them down. He's himself flown away and lifted off with a plane and gone. Okay. That's why it's not funny, but it's true. When you do this work for so many years, we have to make it fun and colorful, and it's not just about it's not about dropping into the victim mode, which is an incredibly important aspect you have to also understand, is that when you're doing this work with yourself, with your clients, with a coach or a therapist, whatever, if at any point you feel that you are regurgitating this information to the point where you feel a victim, and you go out into the world and you begin to say to yourself, well, I was abandoned by my father. He was not there. He never showed up as a father figure in my life. He didn't show me love. He was controlling all these things, and you go off and you, what's the word? When you are affirming that, okay? So when you're finding an affirmation in the real world for it, then you're just feeding the victim stage of your healing. Healing has stages. And so before we get to the victim stage, we are oblivious. We're oblivious of all of this, so we just go along in our life and we think that life is happening at us. That's not true. Life is happening inside of us. And I'm going to break and bust someone's perception bubble today. But the mind, the life is a manifestation of your mind, your health, your body. Everything is a manifestation of your mind. Everything else is on top. The physical processes that happen in your body are kind of like the accumulation in the time space that happens. So what you get is disease, for example. Okay, and if you don't get this concept, then you can ask a question. That's totally fine, because this is a mind-blowing concept, and it's been proven. It's been, you can just read into work of Gabor Mate, Joe Dispenza. You can read into clinical work, psychosomatic work. So we're here to not just give you a script, okay? I'm not going to give you a script or a set of actions that you need to go out and find a man for yourself according to the way you act and behave, and create an identity. That's what a lot of dating coaches will do, like those old school dating coaches, especially for men. They're like, a woman only likes this kind of stuff, so you must do this kind of stuff for a woman to like you, so therefore you must become this. Yeah, you have to become. The truth is, we must become the person that we want to date ourselves. That's the truth. We have to become that person for the future vision that we have. We have to embody that now. It doesn't matter if it's your relationship, it doesn't matter if it's your business, it doesn't matter if it's your wealth, your money, your prosperity, the kind of family or house or the location that you want to live in. You have to embody that person. So just for a moment, think for yourself, how would I think, feel, and act if I was already in a healthy, safe relationship? Now, what we don't understand is that these wounds that we carry, they define us and they create an identity for us, and they hold us back to our past. That is all there is. The past doesn't exist anymore. All that exists is the pockets of memory that define you, who you are. And we have to change those pockets of memory. We cannot erase them. It is impossible in neuroscience to erase that with just... You can only integrate everything that has happened to you, so it no longer is triggering you. You are now at peace with what happened to you in the past. But what tends to happen is that we learned to emotionally disable ourselves. Just emotionally disable our emotions. But your emotions are the most important thing, my loves. Your emotions are the information. They give you information as to how you're feeling right now, as to what is coming up in your body and why. So we must embody, we have to move through those emotions because they are indicators. They are a way to survive. So what's important to understand is that when we talk about the feminine energy, there's a lot about survival, okay? when we were growing up, when the ego is developing, the ego's job is for you to survive. The ego is not the baddie. Okay? The ego is not the baddie. The ego is not the baddie. You have to write it down. You have to understand that there is no part of you that you've been created in a way that you've been created. You've been created in a God's eye. Everything about you is magnificent. Your mind is magnificent. Your body is magnificent. You are magnificent. You are a gorgeous being. Your soul is magnificent. Your ego is magnificent. Everything about you is magnificent. You have to recognize this. There is nothing inside of you that is not necessary for the life of you. That is not necessary for the point in your life that you are today. Your best thinking got you here. But now you have to change in order for you to move forwards, in order for you to step above of what you've already experienced. You don't want to be repeating the same patterns. You don't want to be repeating the same relationship patterns, right? And so when it comes to survival, our ego is being triggered. Each and every time we are emotionally neglected by our fathers, the ego begins to make an association that, oh my God, we're not receiving love, we might die. This is literally what the ego does. And for a developing ego, we know this in Maslow's hierarchy, which is obviously food, shelter, water, number one layer. Is that in check? If not, we are threatened. And what happens when we're in threat? Fight, flight switches on. When fight, flight switches on, we're in survival mode. The feminine energy ain't gonna go there. She ain't even gonna go where there's survival mode. She's gone. She's like, honey, bring on the masculine. The masculine's gonna deal. So that's what happens with the wounded feminine. The wounded feminine had to survive. She had to be the warrior. She had to fight for her throne, for wherever she was going. You will relate to this if you are in your business, if you had to literally work your way up to get a seat at the table with the big boys, as I call it. Okay? At the CEO's table with the big boys. You had to morph yourself. You had to put on a suit. You had to put on your stilettos. You had to put on a frown. You have to make sure that you're not sexually looked at, you're not looked at sexually, all of these things, right? So, when our survival, our survival needs are being threatened, we cannot be in the feminine. So obviously, above the food and the shelter, we have I've gone completely blind. Not blind, I've gone completely blank. We have security. Okay, so do we feel secure? And so security obviously comes from that masculine energy, from that safe masculine energy. The security really comes from how well the father is able to hold space for the children and the mother as well. And so you see how much how much the dynamics and the polarities plays a part in all of this, in our safety and how we show up, and okay. And so finally we have the in this hierarchy, if we don't have the basic needs, we will be shut off from our feminine energy, and we will have women who grow up in this patriarchal society who live in their masculine energy. And one of those women was me. I had to live that kind of life because my basic needs, at the end of the day, my basic needs when I was growing up were not met. Okay? So when I was growing up, my father was not there. He was working all the time. Was it his fault? No. He thought that he needs to provide for the family. So that was his form of love. At the end of the day, that was his perception. So I didn't receive the emotional love. When I was 1 year old, when I was a newborn, my father's brother died. Do you think that my father was able to be emotionally present for his newborn child? Probably not, right? It's probably not that easy when we're processing a trauma. What happens when we're processing a trauma? Many of you are doing this work. So what happens? You want to retreat, right? You don't want to. Naturally, when we're emotionally processing something, we'll do either two things, right? We'll either shut it down and find a way to escape it. Exercise, food, work. What happens when we're escaping it too much? When it's not normal anymore. We've got overeating, we've got food disorders, we've got workaholic behaviors. We've got all of these things that all of a sudden turn into addictions and compulsions. They turn into anxieties and depressions. Yes. And so the more we can heal ourselves from these things, the more we heal from these mental disorders that define people, that diagnose and define people for the rest of their life as some sort of an ill, sick, diseased person. And that's not true. We all go through life. And what's really beautiful and really gorgeous is that the mind is self-healing and self-preserving, okay? So you know this, right? When we have a wound, a physical wound, what happens? It starts to heal by itself, right? Because it has mechanisms. The same way, the mind, what it's doing is that all of these triggers that you have in your life, so what I mean by that is, let's say you have a pattern of unavailable partners in your life, right? And you keep dating like the same guy. You're like, wow, he's the same as the next guy, as the previous guy. He's the same as the previous guy. Like, what's happening? That is because what your mind is doing is trying to resolve the primary trauma of you and your father when your father has abandoned you in this scenario, if that's the case. Are you getting this? Are we getting this? Can I have a yes? So, so that is important for you to recognize, because we tend to see, like, I'm going to hone in on this because I feel like that's the energy that we need today. We are self-healing creatures. Everything can be healed. Everything can be resolved because the mind is already looking for it. Your body is totally intuitive. It will tell you what you need to eat to heal, all these different things. What happens is we're out of tune with the body. We're totally out of tune, and it again comes back to these traumas that we carry. These traumas disconnect us from the body because emotions live in the body. And so let me just have a think how far I want to take this. how long has it been? It's been 30 minutes. So I told you just a tiny bit of my story. Let me tell you my whole story so you can relate to this. I'll give you an example. When there's something happens to us, there's a health condition, it usually begins to show symptoms, right? So what we do is we go to the hospital. So the hospital is a place where they'll only treat you when you're showing signs and symptoms, right? Because the signs and symptoms show that there's something wrong in the body. So we get to a point as humans, we've been taught that we have to get to a point as humans that we are at such a peak of our suffering that something needs to change. But should it be like this? Should we not keep a kind of a close eye or a checklist or a checkpoint, whatever you want to call it, maybe a Trello, on all of our areas of our life, on our relationships, how they're moving, how they're shifting, how they're developing, how they're growing, how we're healing. Is that not how it should be? Shouldn't it be prevention over we're us getting to a point where we are so dissatisfied with our life, we want to take our life? Shouldn't it be like that? And I had to experience that. I got to a point in my life where I was so broken that I remember I was in a small apartment in Canary Wharf, London. My bedroom was the size of a corridor, and when I looked out the window, it was all like skyscrapers and lights and concrete. There was nothing else. And it was such a what do you call it? It was basically an image of my internal world. I was so broken physically. I was going through a burnout when it got to a point where I couldn't exercise for 10 minutes without feeling like I'm going to collapse and throw up. My muscles were like jelly at that point in time. I could only tolerate egg whites and fruits at the time. I could not eat anything else because I could imagine how inflamed my body was. I had so many menstrual problems. My endometrial lining was growing insane, and I had PCOS, symptoms of PCOS. And on top of all of this, I had an eating disorder. And on top of all of this, I was so anxious that I started having panic attacks. That was initiated by the burnout. So I remember I had a panic attack from a simple thing as my ex-partner ringing me. I started having panic attacks just from literally like my body was like, don't touch me, don't, just don't. And I was just frozen. I was in such freeze mode. And on top of this, I attracted a narcissist into my life. And I smile now because it is crazy how everything is a reflection of the internal process inside of us. And so for me, this fascinates me. I love the mind. I'm a neuroscientist. I love the mind. This is my job. I love it. And so I was at such a low point in my life. So think about my energy at the time. My frequency was so low because of all the emotions that I was holding into. And so all of the traumas, everything that I did, the burnout was driven by the trauma response that happens in my life. And so everything kind of came to the tip where I was crying on the cold. I remember how cold and how bright this hospital room was, and everything was just everything. You know, when there's just one thing wrong, maybe you got like an infection on your toe and you're like, fuck me, I've got an infection on my toe. No, like I had infections. I was being tested for Lyme's disease. I was being tested for the rarest bone conditions. Nothing was coming back. Nothing. The doctors were finding nothing in me. I was being prescribed benzodiazepines. I was prescribed propranolol that I never took. I was being manipulated and verbally and physically abused by a man that I allowed into my life. And every single thing in my life was because of my decisions. I was such a, when you looked at me, it was such a gorgeous girl. Why was she so wounded? And it was all because of the first layer of my life, the first foundation that I've set for my life. And because I've let myself loose, I completely cut contact with my family at the time. I even stopped seeing my friends at the time. I became so alone. I just started to get more and more and more like into this cave. And it was the cave that I've created for myself allowed my spiritual awakening. That situation, that burnouts, that pity, that victim mentality, all of the questioning my own existence, questioning my insecurities because I was being manipulated by this person in my life that I had, being abused, all of it started to come up for me. This is what I needed. This is what I needed to begin to heal the traumas inside of me. And so it was only when I stopped pushing everything, pushing the traumas, pushing away everything, and actually instead of that I've started to embrace it. I started to expand into it. And this concept really flows for so many different things. When we stop contracting in life, and when I say stop contracting in life, I do mean every single aspect of your life. Stop contracting in your relationships. Because you have to understand that just how in my life everything and all of the things happened, I was in total and complete mode of masculine energy, by the way. Of course, I was in survival mode. For at least 5 years of my life, I was in total mode of survival. And so, being in safety can only happen when we heal the traumas. And the relationship that we have with our Father has to first become an inquiry. You cannot simply say, I forgive my Father for all that is done, and we move on. I've forgiven. Do you know how many clients, the first thing that they say, I don't think I have a problem with my father wound. Okay, so why do you keep dating men that are unavailable? What is behind this? We are afraid to get angry at our parents. We are afraid to get angry at our parents because they brought us up. They are the king and the queen in our lives. We look up to them, no matter they were bad or good for us. And this is important to understand, is that it's okay to feel every single emotion in your life. You have to feel the spectrum of emotions in order for you to integrate them, in order for you to liberate them. This is what emotional somatic healing is about. This is what trauma healing is about. It doesn't matter how small or good, small or big these moments, pockets of memory that are attached to emotions are. It doesn't really matter. So I had to experience the tip of the masculine, like what embodying the masculine energy will do if I neglect. And I can tell you, for one, at that point in my life, I was a personal trainer and I despised women. I was a nutritionist and personal trainer, and I despised women. I thought they were weak. I never wanted to be like them. I didn't have periods, of course. Why? Because I didn't honor the feminine. I didn't honor my body. I didn't honor myself. I thought that women were a competition. I thought men were competition. These are all traits of wounded feminine, and these are totally fine to speak them out loud, to bring them to surface. It's important. This is the work that we do. You can't get past it, you know? And I created a shield. I created a physical shield. I became so masculine. And I'm not saying that that's for every single person. At the time I was bodybuilding. So I'm not saying that the practice of bodybuilding is a totally masculine activity and women that are in it are wounded feminine. No, this was my reality. This was my projection on life. This was how I was manifesting my own reality. But that's important. You see, you kind of have to begin, and when we do purpose work with females, I have to ask them, was this an ego goal? Was this a goal that you set yourself because of a trauma wound that happened to you? Because the moment I began to realize that my bodybuilding, my body obsession, my body dysmorphia are all driven by the abandonment wound and the fear of rejection that I'm going to receive from each and every person in my life, I didn't want to go back on that stage ever again. I stopped bodybuilding. I just exercised for my own fun. So this is how far we take this. When you get clear about the traumas that happen to you, you get clear about your purpose. You don't need to sit down and think, what is my purpose? Your purpose comes to you when you can connect to the core of you. I know that I'm moving around a lot around the father wound, but this is how far it kind of takes you out. So, when we first address the father wound, we have to ask ourselves how much of the father wound we have right now. How much of the father wound is in our current reality? Like, how much are we acting out from the wounded feminine? And I'm not going to tell you that the cure for this or the solution for this is to go and do some sensual dancing. It will help you, but until you actually address the core bits, the core issues, there will always be lingering, and there will always be controlling the energetics of you. And I taught this at the Magnetic Woman, the Magnetic Woman 3-day mini course. I told you guys that we are already a magnet. Energetically, our thoughts, emotions, templates, everything about us at the end of the day is simply atoms at the core of it, okay? So when we create thoughts, they carry frequency. And so we are energetic beings. So the frequency that we carry attracts the people into our lives. So you are already a magnet. You are non-stop. You are a manifester and you're a magnet, and you're non-stop manifesting not your current desires, but your current internal process. So what you have to do is you have to begin to create a link between your truest, deepest desires and heal the parts of yourself so you can begin to align to that. Is that making sense? Yes. We have to align to that. So I told you a lot about the father wound today, but there is so much to cover. There is so much to delve deep and to actually heal this. And so I kept telling you about the ladder of transformation. We have to go through from the core of the trauma healing to the belief systems that we carry, reprogramming your belief systems of your mind, retraining neural circuits in your mind, breaking the old circuits and creating new neural connections. And that is, as much as it is mental work, it is also somatic work. And that is when we work with the emotions, we allow. And really it's about safety. It is about safety at the end of the day. how much safety can you create each and every single time when we do this work together? The safe container that we create in order to heal the emotions inside us, in order to reprogram the belief systems, so that our thoughts, narratives, and stories are not determined by the trauma that has happened to us, but are determined by our decisions. And so this is why a lot of women will come to me and say, I've done the mantra work, I've done the affirmations work, I've read the books, I've done the meditations. Why is this still happening to me? Why am I not manifesting the partnership, the love that I desire? Now you know why. Now you know why that we cannot simply just brainwash ourselves. We have to do the brainwashing, but we also have to do the healing work. So I'm going to leave you with this note, my loves. And I will say that the Magnetic Woman doors close on the 1st of November when we start the Magnetic Woman 12-week journey container together. It's a group container where we delve deep into healing the mother wounds, the father wounds, it coming into feminine magnetism, where you effortlessly manifest things into your life. So you no longer have to. You're becoming the woman that you deserve to be. And we still have spaces. So if you're interested, then you need to go to my description. And unfortunately, the pre-sale offers have already gone, but you can still get into Magnetic Woman with the full price, or you can get the installments. So it is a gorgeous course that we're going to go through, and I'm very excited. So I love you all, and I'll see you very, very soon.